In module 10 and module 11 preceding this particular section, we have discussed two important concepts which we have described as overriding objectives to be achieved through successful execution of strategic marketing. And those two concepts we described as brand resilience and customer advocacy. And we earlier discussed that both of these related but different positions of strength. One that relates to the brand resilience, that means the way that brand travels through ups and downs in the business domain, the way that brand responds to adverse situations, and customer advocacy, where customer participates in the marketing process and creates that extremely valuable asset of today, which is the market buzz, the word of mouth publicity, the preference and referrals that co-creates an almost unassailable position, competitive position. And we discussed that both of these concepts or positions of strength are rooted in corporate reputation. We discussed the concept of reputation and the way it connects to culture, ethics, values, deep-rooted concern for the stakeholder, as well as the reputation is derived from tangible elements like the product or service performance, quality, productivity, and so on. And therefore, we will now discuss the role of marketing communication, which increasingly we called integrated marketing communication or IMC, and the responsible role that IMC plays in creating, nourishing, enhancing corporate reputation in conjunction with all the other business functions. Now, communication is a bidirectional process. There are senders and receivers, and we will see some models. But at this moment, it is important to note that in the marketing context, we are talking about communication of a message from the marketer to the consumer to the customer through different media. And of course, good marketing communication also is a closed loop process, so there is a feedback path from the receiver of the message to the sender of the message. That means from the marketplace, from the consumer customer back to the organization. And message is different from just facts and figures. Message is quite aligned to the concept of offerings and position that we have discussed before, which means that a message contains information as well as interpretation. And interpretation happens in the minds of the receiver, and in that sense it is always strongly subjective as well, in spite of the objective facts that are transmitted through the message. And that is why, as we were discussing, that in the extremely cluttered marketplace, global marketplace of today, it is very difficult to communicate the real value offered by the organization through its products and services in that 5 or 10 seconds that it can expect from the customer, consumer at large, because of the multiple media, multiple streams of messages that are constantly assaulting the senses of the consumers. So the number of hoardings, the number of newspapers, magazines, internet sites, the television programs, there are radio programs. So messages are being beamed across to the consumers almost 24/7 today. And in that scenario, therefore, it becomes very difficult to convey the superiority of your product or service in spite of all strategic efforts, until and unless your marketing communication efforts create on the basis of course, the factual superiority of your products and services, but the role of marketing communication to create that reputation, which in 5 or 10 seconds therefore allows the consumer to listen to you in spite of all the clutter and din and noise, is the process that we are going to look at in this session. So obviously, this creation of the brand value and reputation is a constant interaction between tangible elements and intangible elements that, as we just discussed, the product or service features. We can write service here as well. And different types of physical assets or physical evidence, which is also part of the marketing mix today. The employee's role, that means the people role who deliver the product and services, and along with that, matching with the intangible elements in the customer's lifestyle, personality, emotion. So this matching, it is like two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and this matching is important to create the brand value and the reputation. And therefore, very clearly, your marketing communication today cannot be one size fits all, because we are clearly looking at this other half, and we are looking at it as a continuum, as a cycle. So it's very important that therefore marketing communication has to depend on a kind of mass customization and as much one-to-one linking as possible. So customers' identity, their consumption styles, their preferences, their experiences, their lifestyle, with the company's offering, the personality and all that, is that what creates the brand resilience. And this matching, therefore, we are saying, and that is why today this one-to-one communication using technology's help, using different other possibilities that we have today, it has become very important. So, one-to-one Marcom. It means that just as we have discussed about the so-called marketing mix, where we have all those 4 P's or 7 P's, that means that price, product, promotion, place, and along with that the people, the physical evidence and assets, the process, and all of those that we have discussed before. In the same way, within all those P's, we have this P which stands for promotion, and promotion here we are bringing it as an integrated marketing communication, or IMC as we call it. So, IMC mix. So, IMC mix consists of advertising, personal selling. Usually when we talk marketing communication, we immediately think about advertising, but as you can see, these are equally important. We discussed a bit about the public relations in the previous module. So, personal selling, advertising, sales promotion, direct marketing, all of these are important issues. And of course, within the domain of marketing, as you can see that if we do this as consumer marketing or B2C, and this is B2B, then here it is primarily this advertising. There is mostly advertising, a little bit of, and here we are calling person to person selling. So, in B2B it is mostly marketing communication rides on person to person selling, whereas in B2C it is rides on advertising, of course also on direct marketing. Direct marketing also is an important element here, and PR also plays an important part, because that is a very key strategy for reputation management, that also. But here the role of PR is more important, because as we have discussed in B2B, we have fewer number of customers, but customers whose buying values, lifetime values are a lot higher individually. So, integrative marketing communication has come up as a concept, because today, as I was discussing, marketing faces this challenge of increasing fragmentation and segmentation, as well as the clutter in the marketplace, the clutter in the message domain that is enveloping the consumer, and because we need to create as far as possible this one-to-one communication using the power of information technology, communication technology. So, this concept of taking a holistic systems view of marketing communication, which we are calling integrated marketing communication, becomes very important. The two core concepts that we have introduced in strategic marketing earlier, we need to look at them again. So, this is the Ansoff matrix that we have discussed right from the beginning. So, if it is a existing offering in an existing market, then the role of marketing communication is to help market penetration, to aid market penetration. On the other hand, if it is a existing offering, but we are looking to a new geographical market or a new demography segment, then that is market development. If it is a new offering in an existing market, so it is kind of aiming at higher wallet share from the customer, so it is a new offering development. And of course, if it is a new offering to a new market, then we are looking at some kind of a radically different set of marketing challenges, which is usually the tougher side. And we also know that the marketing communication, which is at the introduction stage in the product life cycle, as we know that this is where our focus is on product leadership. So, here the marketing communication role is more of information and customer education. So, effective transfer of knowledge becomes very important at this stage in the marketing communication package. So, there will be, even though even in B2C, we will have to supplement the mass advertising or the mass media efforts with almost personal person to person selling through demonstrations, through various sorts of interfaces at exhibitions, at road shows and so on at the early stage, particularly if it is in this domain or this domain. So, it is kind of quite connected with this, and therefore, information and education becomes a very important part of marketing communication at that stage. Whereas, in the later stages, it becomes more important to establish the standard, the dominant design that is enshrined in your product or service, the quality, the productivity, which are actually related to operational excellence. Those become important ingredient of the marketing communication at this stage. And as we know that around this stage, we have to then slice and dice the offerings in number of niche approaches, because this is the domain where the operational excellence must be supplemented with customer intimacy, right. And this concept that we have discussed number of times before in other aspects of marketing strategy equally will apply to the marketing communication strategy, that it will evolve along the product life cycle. Some of the interesting new marketing, this is borrowed from Kiani's work, and as we can see that the transformation that is taking place, that this one to many communication, that means there is a company which makes soap and it goes through the mass media, through various methods of mass communication, it tries to reach out to many customers through hoardings, through television ads, through print ads, through all possible vehicles of mass communication, it tries to reach out to. So, this is what we call one to many. But today that is also almost overshadowed in some cases by many to many, which we also call C2C or consumer to consumer communication. So, for example, in travel, you can go to a travel site and see the promotional material given out by a particular hotel or particular airline, but you will also simultaneously find a whole stream of comments from other customers who have stayed at that hotel, the positive and the negative things they have to say, and that many to many communication become a very sometimes even more powerful than the one-to-many communication. So, in many cases we will find on these particularly travel marketing sites that the relative space provided for one-to-many communication is much smaller than the space provided for the many-to-many communication. So, mass marketing, we discussed also that more and more we have to look at one-to-one. So, mass marketing is giving way to individualized or customized marketing. It is very important today to open dialogue. So, companies constantly use various kinds of information communication technology platforms. So, banks will try to communicate with you through their ATM machines every time you have gone there to fetch some money, or and you will find that there is also more and more in the new types of ATM machines, the customer can also input that whether he or she is interested in a particular offering that is being displayed on the ATM machine. So, there is a bidirectional communication mode created through this dialogue mode as opposed to just simply beaming the message. So, we can see therefore that there is a whole lot of other research work that are kind of similar, that this is the point that we have discussed again and again, customer as a, instead of customer as a target, today we are looking at customer as a partner. This is the concept of customer advocacy, which I was talking about in the beginning of today's session, which we discussed in greater detail in an earlier session. And this whole thing about not thinking in terms of segments, but thinking of customer communities. Customer communities, because one-to-many communication is giving way to many-to-many communication, and as a result this community formation, who actually will, you would like that those communities to be dominated by your advocate customers, is a far more potent, powerful combination that marketing strategists today are trying to achieve, instead of the kind of the earlier approach of STP, which was in a way something outside the organization. Today what you are trying to do is make it as a part of a total thinking. So, this many-to-many communication superseding one-to-many communication, communities superseding segmentation, customer advocacy segmenting, thinking of customer as a target, and therefore looking more at the customer as a co-creating partner. These are some new thoughts that are therefore modifying our thinking with respect to this creation of the IMC mix. But the fundamentals that the connection between the information requirement of the buyer and the features and the nature of the offering, and therefore these factors are all kind of interconnected and interacting, and this needs to be thought of. So, these fundamentals do not go away just to take care of these sort of conceptual elements. The hardcore, supplying of the required information to the required or to the targeted market, those needs remain. So, which means that nature of the offering is in a way determine the design of the IMC mix. So, advertising is, as we discussed, advertising is the usual, we just now drew this diagram that B2C and B2B. So, this is the domain of P2P selling, and this is the domain of advertising and mass comm. But it is also important to note that if it is a complex B2C product, then it may be necessary to move. So, even if it is a B2C product, but if it is a complex product, high technology, so if it is a smartphone, then it will need supplementation to induce customer purchase action. So sales promotion at that stage, which is kind of a type of person to person selling in this case, will have to supplement all the advertising work. But if it is a soap or shampoo, then possibly, as long as you take care in your advertising both cognitive factors as well as the affective factors, then advertising is perhaps more appropriate. And as we said, that if it is more complex, or if it is a B2B situation, small number of high potential buyers, and if they are kind of in a cluster, like we often have these professional goods markets concentrated in a particular area in a city. In all of these cases, we do have field sales people who become an integrated, an integral part of the IMC. Advertising and direct marketing necessary when we are looking at a global market or a national market. Then even for products which are complex or B2B, which will need sales attention, to create what we call warm sales calls or hot sales leads, we have to also supplement it with different forms of advertising and promotion. Integrated marketing communication in the online environment today, this is just a kind of a summary of what we just described. This one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, all of these need to be thought of, and in many cases the IMC mix may need each one of these. So these are not either or, they are in many cases to be thought of as a combined strategy using all these building blocks. Similarly, we need to combine maybe the earlier generation just simple print ad, text ad. Today you have to also think simultaneously in terms of sound and image, because for most B2C type of situation today, television and movies and product placement, these are a very important part of the total messaging, as well as the communication over the internet, over the mobile phone. So when you think of a message today that is to be communicated, one has to think it in terms of text, sound, image, and all of that. And in spite of all of that, it still has to convey a coherent meaning. Now this appears to be a simple common sense, but if you sit through 10 ads beamed to you over the television any particular evening, then you will immediately see that creation of that coherent meaning in your mind in that 30 seconds is very tough, and not many, in fact very few advertisers achieve that goal, and that is why very often they have to rely on the reputation to supplement. So almost all the marketing communicators today know that the consumer attention is constantly getting fragmented due to this large number of this 30-second, 40-second, 50-second messages that are beamed across to them, and anyway these messages are coming in between episodes of a particular interesting serial or a movie and so on. So the customer anyway has the tendency to go away, do something else and come back, or surf the channels. So you need to hook the customer within the first few seconds, and therefore more and more the communication tries to go to the affective behavior cues, triggers, rather than the cognitive. That means we are more and more attracted to the emotional issues or the intangible issues associated with that product, that service, that brand, rather than the cognitive factors arising out of the rational facts and figures. But because we are attempting to connect at that emotional level, the messages are always a lot more subjective today. And because, as I discussed, that subjectivism, that subjective depiction is based on the interpretation of the message in the minds of the communicator, and that may not be always the same. It may not be in synchronism with the mind of the receiver, and that is the problem that creates the challenge for creating this coherent meaning, particularly when you need to create the same the consistency in your message over the internet, over the television, over the print media. So it's sometimes, but when you achieve that, of course, like for example, recently when we see some of the great successes like the Har Friend Zaruri Hai, one of the mobile service companies campaign, now that connects at an emotional level. It actually is a fun episode to watch, and always the fun, the humor and all those are accentuated. It has a catchy tune, and at the same time it beams across the message that communicating with your friends is very good and very desired and important, and of course the more you communicate, the more revenue accrues to that mobile telephony service provider. So that is a very interesting and it is the same message that is now being communicated through their internet site and through the mobile phone, through the catchy tune and so on, and that's a good example that if you can handle the challenge well of this creating consistent coherent message across all different media, and which can hook the customer in few seconds and retain the customer's attention, and then you have achieved great success. And this is what is this whole list of points that we are talking about: the coordination of the process and the direct connection with the internet. All of these in a way subject to this challenge. So the first 3 points in a way are the challenges that can be achieved by paying attention to these factors which are given in the following points. So you can study these in great depth, apply them to the promotions that you are seeing. We were discussing about the life cycle, and when you are actually designing this coherent meaning, the consistency of the message, immediately you must also remember that the content is there is a composition. So as the product or that business goes through this cycle, this combination of informative, persuasive and reminder. So when we are talking about this mobile service message, we can see that there is not much to inform now about a particular mobile service, right? And so what your message therefore, because there are some people say too many mobile service providers today in India, and the competition is fierce. The market is also growing at a accelerated rate, but the competition is fierce, and that's why today you pay one of the lowest per minute or per second charge for using the mobile telephony service, one of the lowest in the world that we pay in India. And in that intense competitive domain, your marketing communication today, maybe it is, we are not yet at this maturity level, because the penetration is still, it is quite high compared to where it was 10 years back, Today it may be almost approaching 50%, but even then your persuasive part of the marketing communication is today perhaps a bit thicker than the informative part. And as we progress, the persuasive part remains very solidly important. It is there right from the beginning. This is, as you can see, this does not change. The informative part becomes thinner as you go across the life cycle. The reminder becomes bigger, but the persuasive becomes the central part of the whole process. So, to conclude, you need to create this coherent and consistent communication across all different channels, and in spite of all the different media that you will be using. And when in creating that mix, you have to remember that, as we discuss some examples, that the informative, persuasive and the reminder part, they need to be balanced. And if you are able to achieve that, then you some of the examples that we discussed just now can create a tremendous impact. We will discuss a little bit detail about how to achieve that balance. This block diagram explains in a little bit more detail this process of creating the message, that there is a flow, a process that is important, that starting from your research input, creating the strategic decision to the tactical decision, and then you have to measure the effectiveness. A very interesting concept that we can discuss at this stage is, or just to it's an easy to remember acronym which we say SOS TAC, SOSTAC. So this is actually the process of creating the marketing strategy as well as your integrated marketing communication strategy and the mix. So this S stands for situation analysis, right. The situation analysis will relate to the product life cycle position. It will also relate to what is your need, whether you are trying to do a new offering development or diversification or penetration or market development. So based on that, you can create your objectives that you are trying to achieve in your strategy. So obviously your marketing strategy drives your IMC strategy, and in a way how to design and deploy your IMC strategy is this SOSTAC process. So the next, obviously then we have our strategy, and then we have the tactical issues, the tactical plan, and then we have the necessary what we call action, the implementation of both of the strategy and tactical plan, and then control action, right. So in the strategic side, we can look at that, all those STP issues, the community creation issues, the emotional bonding issues, the customer delight issues. Those are the key areas that are the concern of the strategic decision. In the tactical execution, then we are looking at that what will be the combination of this informative, persuasive, reminder processes that we need to create through the very beginning, the slide that we saw, through this mix of how much of personal selling, how much of direct marketing, how much of advertising, how do we actually achieve this balance between the PR, the advertising, the direct marketing as well as the demonstration, the P2 person to person selling and so on. Okay. So, those are the, you can say, the nitty-gritties of the strategy, which we call the tactical execution. And then of course, we need to measure as we deploy the strategy, we need to constantly evaluate the effectiveness of what we are doing. So, the measuring the advertising effectiveness is done through media research, the message research, that means assess how well a particular medium delivers a message, where and when to place the message, and the size of the audience and so on. The message research will be that to what extent you have been able to deliver that coherent, consistent across all channel message impact that you are aiming, and so that is an important one. So, you will see, if you observe the same television ad today, 10 years back that same ad would have been there for months, or it might have been repeated even a year after. But today, even over a span of 1 month, there are subtle changes made in the message that is contained, because we constantly do this research with respect to that how well the message is getting received through and how consistent it is and how coherent it is across the different media. Okay. In case of public relation effectiveness, that is kind of a little easier, because you can get almost instant feedback, and overall at this stage we must again emphasize that the ethics issues like the use of cookies or advertising to children, creating artificial needs, all those things that we discussed in a previous module, that are no-nos today or don'ts of advertising, of marketing communication today, because that ultimately harms your reputation.